Welcome back, my dear listener. Today I'm going to tell you the story of Leela, a brave girl who dared to uncover the chilling secrets of the Frostman lurking in the mountains, and the icebound fate that awaited those who strayed too close to his haunting domain. If you enjoy this story, give it a like, turn on notifications, and subscribe. Co-see. And remember, I'm always listening. Suggest a story if you dare, and I'll craft a special one just for you. Now, get ready and follow me down into the darkness. In a village that lay nestled below the great, jagged peaks of the mountains, shadows began to creep as night fell. The stars were tiny pinpricks of light, twinkling high above, but the villagers paid little attention to them. Instead, they whispered about something much scarier than the darkness above. They talked in hushed tones about the Frostman, a creature wrapped in cold and mystery who was said to roam the icy slopes of the mountains. The stories told of his skin, white and glistening like fresh snow, and his eyes that sparkled like frozen lakes, full of a deep and chilling sadness. Children warned each other never to wander too close to the mountains, because sometimes those who did disappeared. They left behind only an eerie silence that chilled the bones of those who stayed behind. The stories warned that the Frostman's icy touch could freeze someone from the inside out, leaving them to become part of the cold, forever trapped in the white depths of the mountain's embrace. Despite the spooky stories, there lived a brave young girl named Leela. Leela had always been a curious child, her heart filled with questions about everything around her. More than anything, she felt a strong pull toward the mountains that towered over her village. One particularly bitter cold evening, with the wind howling like a wild beast searching for a friend, Leela decided that this was the time for her adventure. She had been warned many times by the villagers to stay away from those great peaks, but her heart and mind were restless with unanswered questions. Why would the Frostman take people? What really happened to those who vanished? With the breath of winter on her cheeks, she set off into the woods that edged the village, unaware of how this choice would change her life forever. As Leela stepped deeper into the trees, the world around her grew quiet, almost too quiet. The air felt sharp and crisp, and every time she exhaled, her breath formed a thin mist that floated away in the frosty air. The trees towered high above her, their branches heavy with thick layers of white snow, blocking out the last rays of the dying sunlight. The shadows danced around her in the fading light, flickering in the corners of her vision, making her heart pound like a drum in the stillness. She often glanced behind her, half expecting the Frostman to leap out from the shadows, but excitement and fear twisted inside her, pulling her forward into the unknown. After walking for what felt like hours, Leela finally came to a large clearing. The snow here was untouched and smooth, shimmering like stars scattered across the ground. It was a beautiful sight, but something about the quietness made her uneasy. In the center of the clearing, she noticed something unusual, a shape half buried in the snow. It was a large, black boot that looked far too big for any villager she knew. As she stepped closer, an unsettling chill raced down her spine. She knelt beside it, brushing away the sparkling frost with trembling fingers. What happened to the person who wore this boot? Did the Frostman have a hand in this mystery? The thought made her shiver. Just then, a strong gust of wind howled through the clearing. The sound was deep and growling, as if the very mountain were grumbling. Leela looked around, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. But there was no one in sight. The echoes of the fierce wind wrapped around her and sent shivers through her entire body. As panic gripped her heart, she briefly remembered all the warnings she had ever heard about the Frostman. Picking herself up, she felt a powerful urge to leave, to run back to the safety of the village. But just as she turned, a strange sensation washed over her. It was as if something icy had brushed across her arm, a coldness that wasn't just from the winter air. She froze in place, her heart racing quicker than she could keep track of. Suddenly, an unnatural fog rolled into the clearing, thickening rapidly until it wrapped around her legs like a slithering snake. Leela felt trapped, panic clenching her chest tightly. The air grew even colder, biting painfully at her exposed skin. From within the swirling mist, a figure began to take shape. Slowly, almost menacingly. As the mist parted, Leela saw him, the Frostman. He was a terrifying sight, his body a twisted mass of snow and ice, with eyes that were black and swirling, as if they consumed everything around him. The sight left her breathless, her chest tightening up painfully. An urge to scream rose up within her, but no sound emerged. For one agonizing moment they stood there, girl and monster, frozen in a time that felt longer than forever. Leela's mind raced with thoughts of home and safety, of warmth and light that felt so far away. She thought of her cozy bed, her family's laughter around the flickering fire, and the warm meals they shared. These comforting thoughts clashed violently with the frightening figure standing before her. When the Frostman took a step forward, the spell was broken. Leela turned and bolted, her heart hammering in her chest as her feet pounded against the frozen ground. She felt as though the cold air was trying to hold her back, pulling her into the icy embrace of the mountain. Her breath came in quick gasps as she burst through the woods, racing towards the safety of the village. She could hear the howling wind behind her, the chill of the Frostman hot upon her heels. The thick fog rolled and swirled, creeping closer, wrapping around her like the icy fingers of the Frostman reaching for her. Fear lent her speed, and she felt strong and alive as she dashed through the trees, her heart roaring in her ears. Finally, she stumbled out of the woods and into the familiar sights of her village, her eyes wide, darting around for any signs of life. The warm glow from the windows of the cottages offered a sense of safety, a haven from the terror of the mountains. Leela didn't stop to catch her breath, but sprinted straight to her home. She flung open the door and rushed inside, slamming it shut behind her. The warmth of the fire crackled in the hearth, and her mother looked up from her cooking, surprise etching her features. "Leela, what's wrong?" her mother asked quickly, sensing her distress. Leela took a moment to catch her breath, her chest heaving as she tried to find her voice. "The Frostman! I saw him!" Her heart raced, and she hunched over, her arms hugging herself as if to ward off the cold that still tingled against her skin. Her mother's face paled slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "You mustn't go into the woods alone," she said gently but firmly. "Those stories about the Frostman have scared many, but they exist to keep you safe. You must promise me, Leela, never to venture out there again." Leela nodded, her cheeks hot with embarrassment, but deep down, she felt a spark of defiance. How could she simply forget the Frostman? What if there were answers to her questions waiting for her in the mountains? As the warmth of her home spread through her, she recalled the vision of the boot half buried in the snow, the mystery of who it belonged to gnawing in her mind. Later that night, as Leela lay in bed, thoughts swirled through her head. The Frostman had scared her, and the sight of him had made her heart race with fear, but she had also felt a strange pull of fascination. What if he had a story? What if there was a reason he took people? A reason that could turn the frightening tales into something completely different. Sleep was distant, the mysteries of the mountain dancing in her mind, refusing to let her rest peacefully. Days passed, and Leela tried to push those thoughts away as she helped her family with their daily chores. The villagers went about their routines, always keeping an eye towards the mountains, their faces clouded with worry whenever they glanced towards the towering peaks. They warned children not to stray too close, intertwining the tales of the Frostman into the fabric of their lives. Daring to disobey these rules felt like playing with fire. However, Leela's heart was restless. Each night, she would gaze out of her window, watching the mountains glimmer under the silvery light of the moon. The beauty that cloaked them in wonder also felt haunting. One particularly still night, she made a decision. She would gather her courage and seek the truth for herself. She wanted to uncover the secrets of the Frostman, rather than let fear dictate her life. If she could confront him and discover the truth, perhaps she could help him, or at the very least free the souls trapped in the mountain's grasp. With her mind set, Leela began to prepare for her journey. She packed some warm clothes, her favorite scarf, a small loaf of bread, and a flask of warm tea. She knew she would need strength for whatever lay ahead. Before the sun rose the next day, she slipped out of her home and ventured towards the mountains once more, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. As she walked through the snowy forest, she could feel the chill creeping in again, but this time, Leela held her head high. She walked to the clearing where she'd first encountered the Frostman. The landscape was even more beautiful in the morning light, the snow sparkling like diamonds. In the center of the clearing, the boot still lay, half buried in the snow. Leela stepped closer and noticed that now there were two boots, one slightly smaller than the other. Her heart raced as she brushed the fresh snow away more thoroughly. Who did these boots belong to? The questions filled her with determination. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the valley in gold and silver, Leela suddenly heard a sound that made her blood run cold away. It was a soft whisper, barely audible, like the rustling of snowflakes. "Help me." The voice was distant, almost lost in the errant wind. Leela felt a shiver run down her spine as she spun around, searching for the source of the pleading tone. Her heart raced as the realization hit her. Someone was out there. Someone who needed help. "Is anyone there?" she called out, her voice shaky and small as it echoed across the clearing. She stepped forward, searching the mist that floated through the trees. Then she saw it. A small figure, almost hidden by a tree, peering out at her. Leela's heart leaped into her throat, but she remembered her determination. She had come to help, to uncover the secrets of the mountain. "I'm here, what happened? Are you lost?" The figure stepped into the light, revealing a girl not much older than Leela. Her clothes were tattered, and her cheeks were pale from the cold. I'm Mira. I was lost in the mountains for days. The Frostman, he caught me, but I escaped. I thought I would be free, but the mountain won't let me leave." Her voice trembled like a fragile butterfly caught in a cold breeze. Mira looked back towards the trees, her eyes filled with worry. "The Frostman takes people to keep them safe, but he's lonely. He collects the lost souls that wander too far." As Mira spoke, Leela felt a surge of compassion. This was a different story than she had heard in the village. "What can we do?" Leela asked, her mind racing. "We have to help you. We have to help all of them." Mira hesitated, her eyes flickering with fear. "You don't understand. The Frostman gets angry if you come too close, but if you can show him kindness, maybe he won't be so afraid." Leela thought about this, her heart racing as she contemplated the risk. Can I really face the Frostman again? But something inside her whispered that this was her chance to change everything. She took a deep breath and nodded, determination burning brightly. "Let's show him we care. Every creature deserves compassion." With Mira beside her, Leela stepped deeper into the frosty forest, seeking the Frostman. The closer they got, the more the icy wind howled, wrapping around them like a cruel spirit, trying to push them away. But Leela held onto her heart's warmth, remembering her family, her village, and now the new friend beside her. She focused on finding the truth and wanting to reach the Frostman. As they approached a rocky ledge, Leela called out, "Frostman, we come with kindness. We want to speak with you." Her voice echoed through the mountains, strong and clear like a brave beacon in the night. Silence followed, thick and heavy in the cold air. Leela's heart pounded as she waited for his reply, hoping that her voice would reach him. And then, through the mist, he emerged. The Frostman towered above them, his icy form shimmering, his eyes dark and swirling like a storm. Mira gasped, but Leela remained steady, her heart racing. "Please, Frostman, we are not here to harm you. We want to help." The Frostman's gaze settled on Leela, and she felt a wave of icy air wash over her, but she stood her ground. "We know you take people because you want them near, but it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to be alone." Leela spoke from her heart, hoping her words would reach the shivering core of this cold creature. He tilted his head, looking at her with a mixture of confusion and sadness. "What do you know of loneliness, girl?" The sound of his voice was deep, echoing like the howling wind. "I know that it hurts," Leela admitted, finding the strength to step closer. But being alone doesn't mean you have to hold on to others. There are spaces in our hearts, huge spaces that can fit new friends." For a moment, the Frostman seemed to waver, his icy form shimmering like a candle in the wind. Leela could see sparks of light flickering in his dark eyes. Mira stepped forward, encouraged by Leela's bravery. "We can share warmth and friendship with you. You could help us explore the wonders of the mountain together instead of trapping us here." The Frostman stared at them, overwhelmed by the words that hung in the air. "I have only known anger. I have only known the biting cold. I was born of the mountain's sorrow." His voice trembled, and for the first time Leela saw the sadness etched into his icy features. "No, Frostman, you can change," Leela said, feeling a surge of hope. "You can find joy and laughter. If you let us help you, we can show you how warm friendship can be. You do not need to take people. You can have friends instead." As she spoke, she reached out a hand, slowly, carefully. The Frostman looked at her for a long, thoughtful moment, and Leela held her breath. Would he step back into the cold? Or would he grasp her hand? Finally, he took a step forward, his icy fingers grazing Leela's warm hand. At this simple touch, a wave of warmth flooded through her. Friendship? The Frostman's voice was softer now, and Leela could hear the hope weaving through the icy tones. Can I truly know such a thing? Yes, Leela exclaimed, a smile emerging despite the cold surrounding them. Together, we can create beautiful stories. She glanced at Mira, who nodded enthusiastically, joining Leela's side. In that moment, something beautiful happened. The air around them shimmered, and a warm light began to spread from Leela's touch. The Frostman felt the warmth creeping into his cold form, melting the heavy ice that had wrapped around his heart for so long. With courage guiding her, Leela and Mira clasped the Frostman's hands tightly. It wasn't easy for him to let go of the past, but, with the bond forming, he felt a flicker of hope igniting deep within him. Slowly, the shadows began to lift, and the chill that wrapped around everyone began to thaw. Together, they stood there, holding hands amidst the swirling winds and the icy tale that had become part of their lives. Lived out. Leela knew this was just the beginning, a new chapter unfolding, intertwining their destinies with friendship, hope, and warmth. And as the days turned into weeks, Leela and Mira learned to navigate the wonders of the mountains side by side with the Frostman. He shared his secrets, and they explored the hidden wonders that the mountains kept safe. Leela realized that the Frostman was not a monster at all, but a misunderstood spirit yearning for connection. In time, the village came to understand too. Leela told them tales of the Frostman, not as a terrifying creature, but as a guardian who brought warmth to their hearts. Each time she spoke, the fear that gripped the villagers unraveled, replaced by curiosity and camaraderie. And so the mountain's secret blossomed, one of friendship, healing, and love. Leela, Mira, and their newfound friend the Frostman proved that even the coldest hearts can learn to thaw and embrace the warmth of friendship. As Leela lay in bed at night, she smiled, knowing she had ventured into the unknown and found not only adventure, but a bond that would last forever. The Frostman had been freed from his loneliness, and she too had discovered the true magic of kindness, a magic that could warm even the coldest snow. Leela stumbled into the village, breathless and wide-eyed. The air felt thick with dread, and the once familiar streets seemed foreign and ominous in the night. The darkness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, making everything look strange and shadowy. It was a dark night, and the villagers, usually bustling with life and laughter, were huddled in their homes. They had drawn their curtains tightly shut, and the warm light from their fires flickered weakly against the walls. Shadows danced like phantoms, moving in the corners and whispering secrets that made Leela's heart race. With cold and fear coursing through her veins, Leela ran to the nearest house, her legs heavy with exhaustion and fright. She banged on the door with all her strength, her small fists pounding against the wood. "Please, let me in!" Her voice was shaky, and for a moment she worried no one would hear. The fear of the Frostman still gripped her tightly, wrapping around her like ice. She shouted again, "Somebody, please!" The door creaked open, revealing old Mrs. Hargrove, a woman whose face was lined with age and wisdom. Her silver hair glinted in the firelight, and her eyes, though clouded with fogged memories, sparkled with concern. "Leela, my dear, what is wrong?" she asked, worry knitting her brow. Mrs. Hargrove had always taken care of everyone in the village, her heart big enough to hold them all. Liver stumbled inside, shivering from the cold. She could hardly catch her breath as she recounted her terrifying experience. "The Frostman! I saw him in the clearing. He was freezing everything," she gasped, her voice catching in her throat. She poured out every detail, the way the air turned frigid, how the trees cracked and splintered with frost, and the icy grip that nearly captured her. Mrs. Hargrove listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to terror, her face reflecting memory stories Leela had grown up hearing but had never thought were real. "Child, you must never go near the mountains," Mrs. Hargrove urged, her voice trembling as if the very thought of the Frostman could summon him. "The Frostman is real. Many have seen him, and many have vanished. You must warn others." Leela nodded vigorously, shaking from both the cold and the fear that clung to her like a damp cloak. Deep inside, however, another part of her hesitated. What if they didn't believe her? What if they laughed at her? Images of mocking faces flickered in her mind, but the genuine fear in Mrs. Hargrove's eyes fueled her resolve. With renewed determination, Leela dashed back into the dark night. She let urgency guide her, her feet pounding against the cobblestones as she raced to every house she could find. She knocked and shouted, waking friends and neighbors, pleading for their attention. "Please listen, the Frostman is coming!" She painted a vivid picture of the Frostman, describing his ghastly appearance. His skin like pale ice, eyes like frosty coals that burned with cold fury. She told them about the icy fear that engulfed her, how it gripped her heart and tugged at her spirit. At first, the villagers she spoke with looked confused, their brows furrowed in disbelief. "It's just a story, Leela," one boy, Thomas, said, scratching his head. But as Leela shared her story with more urgency, dread slowly grew in their expressions. Mothers pulled their children close, eyes wide with uncertainty and fear. People began to exchange worried glances, and the whispers of anxiety spread through the village like wildfire. Leela could see their faces slowly changing, fear flickering behind their eyes as they processed what she had said. As the sun began to set, the air thickened with tension. Men's hands tightened around invisible weapons, and women pulled their children tightly against their sides. The fear in the air was palpable. It crept among them like a shadow waiting to pounce. "We need to stay together," Leela urged, trying her best to calm the growing storm of panic. But the atmosphere had shifted into something darker, and paranoia thickened the air, making it hard to breathe. Soon enough, darkness swallowed the land, turning the village into a place of whispers and shadows. The villagers gathered in the town square, forming an uneasy huddle, their nervous chatter drowning out even the wind. Leela's hands trembled as the reality of their situation settled over her like an unwelcome blanket. Where was the Frostman? Was he watching from the mountains, waiting for the right moment to pounce? As the village buzzed with frantic murmurs, the wind began to howl, rising and falling with an eerie melody. Each haunting note sent shivers down Leela's spine, a chilling reminder that something monstrous lurked beyond their sight, lurking just out of reach. Suddenly, a bone-chilling scream cut through the night, shattering the fragile calm. The village fell silent, hearts pounding in fear. A woman burst from the edge of the dark forest, her face as pale as the moonlight, her eyes wide with terror. "He's coming!" she gasped, barely able to catch her breath. "Frostman, he's coming for us!" Her words echoed like a chilling warning, reverberating through the crowd. Fear turned the village into chaos. The crowd erupted, scrambling for safety as they rushed toward the sanctuary of their homes. Leela found herself swept up in the confusion, her heart racing faster than her legs could carry her. In the midst of the panic, she felt a gnawing dread within her, the dark truth unfurling before her. They were not safe. With the villagers lost in their frantic retreat, Leela felt small and frightened, as if the shadows were whispering right into her ears. She wanted to call out, to remind them that panicking wouldn't help. But the sheer chaos swallowed her voice. In the swirl of flickering torchlight, fear turned from a single beast into a raging storm. Some villagers huddled close, trembling together, while others darted frantically for their homes. Lila's heart raced in her chest as she realized that the Frostman was no longer a tale spun from old voices around the fire. He was becoming very real. The icy breath of fear seeped into her bones, and a dark reality began to grow deeper inside her. No amount of shouting or screaming would keep them safe if the Frostman truly sought them out. As Leela watched her friends and neighbors scatter like leaves in the wind, she felt a heavy weight settle in her heart. Was this the moment that their fear would consume them? Would they allow the Frostman to take not just their peace, but also their very lives? Trying to fight back against the tide of panic, Leela finally mustered every ounce of courage she had left. "Please, we need to stay together," she cried, her voice rising above the chaos. But the wind howled louder, stealing her words away, carrying them off into the dark, empty night. Just as she felt all hope slipping away, something in the air changed. The wind died down for a moment, and in that pause, a chilling hush fell over the village. The torches, still burning, emitted a soft glow, casting wavering shadows that danced across the ground. But a terrible stillness crept in, wrapping around them like a snake. Leela could sense something cold, something watching them. In the silence, the village became a frozen tableau of fear, eyes darting from face to face, searching for answers. Parents clutched their children tightly, exchanging worried glances that spoke volumes. Leela's heart raced. They needed a plan. They needed to defend themselves. But how? Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Mrs. Hargrove in the crowd, her face pale but her eyes ablaze with determination. Leela knew the wise woman held many secrets, stories that could guide them in times of trouble. With newfound resolve, Leela pushed her way through the gathering, seeking the old woman. "Mrs. Hargrove!" Leela called out, trying to keep her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "What do we do? How do we fight back against the Frostman?" The elderly woman looked down at Leela, her eyes wise and deep. "We cannot fight the Frostman with weapons. Our strength lies in unity and courage. We must stand together and face him, not through fear but through love for each other." Leela felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, but doubt still lingered. "For us. But what if he comes for us? What if we can't stop him?" "We will stop him, Leela," Mrs. Hargrove replied firmly, her voice steady. "Take my hand. We will gather everyone. They need to know they are stronger together." Leela grasped Mrs. Hargrove's hand tight, drawing courage from the warmth of her grip. Leading the way, they weaved through the villagers, gathering them near the central bonfire, where the flames crackled and snapped, the heat fighting against the biting chill in the air. As they formed a circle, Leela looked around at the familiar faces, now etched with fear and anxiety. "Everyone listen! We have to stand together! The Frostman feeds on our fear. If we unite, he cannot take us." Slowly but surely, whispers of agreement rippled through the crowd. Families clasped each other's hands. Loud, Leela took a deep breath, feeling a rush of adrenaline course through her. She began to speak again. "We all know stories about the Frostman, but we are strong as a village. We have survived many winters together." "Together!" echoed some voices, emboldening her message. With every word, Leela felt the spirit of the villagers rising. Though fear still hovered like mist in the air, determination began to sparkle in their eyes. The flickering firelight mirrored their growing courage, lighting up the shadows that had once seemed insurmountable. That night, as they stood united, talking and sharing ideas about how to protect themselves, the frost beneath their feet began to seem not so daunting after all. The collective warmth of their hope melted some of the ice that had threatened to invade not just their village, but also their hearts. However, just as a sense of strength began to build, a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the village, shaking them from their newfound bravery. The Frostman was near. Unseen shadows loomed in the darkness, always watching, always waiting. Though fear still lingered like a cold fog, Leela felt a glimmer of hope rise within her. The hope that together, they might just have the strength to face the chilling terror that awaited them. It would take courage, love, and unity to withstand the Frostman and his icy embrace, but she knew they were ready to fight back as one. As the winds howled around them, Leela held tightly to Mrs. Hargrove's hand, ready to face whatever came next. They were no longer just stories. They were a family brought together in bravery. Together, they would stand firm against the chilling threat that loomed beyond the shadows. Hours passed in a nerve-wracking night as shadows danced outside the villagers' homes. The air was thick with tension, and every small sound made hearts flutter in fear. The villagers barricaded their doors and windows with whatever they could find: wooden planks, heavy stones, and furniture. Each small creak of the wood felt like a giant thunderclap in the stillness, echoing in the night's icy silence. But the Frostman was not one to be stopped easily. He was a creature of the night, wrapped in frost and darkness, invincible and terrifying. As Leela sat in her cozy little room, she felt the chill creeping in through the cracks. The wind howled outside, whispering like a lost soul searching for comfort. It played with the branches of the trees, making eerie sounds that seemed to weave into a ghastly tune, creeping around the village like a shroud of fear and anxiety. Leela's heart raced with every gust of wind that rattled her window. She could hear the distant sounds of the villagers trying to comfort each other, but the warmth of those voices felt far away. They were filled with worry, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke from the lanterns they lit to chase away the darkness. Suddenly, a dreadful sound shattered the stillness. A bone-chilling laugh echoed through the night's stillness. It was grotesque and menacing, echoing across the hills and sending icy fingers that curled into the hearts of everyone in the village. It was a sound that felt as though it had seeped into their very souls. The hoot of owls and rustle of night critters ceased, as if they too felt the harrowing presence of the Frostman. He was closer than anyone dared to admit. A wave of terror swept through Leela, and her body froze at the sound, an understanding dawning in her mind like the cold dawning of day. He was not a figment of their imagination. He was real, and he was here. Through the thin wood of her door, She could sense him prowling outside, lurking at the edge of their safety. "What can we do?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. It felt as if the fear pooling in her stomach was sinking deeper, a heavy weight that pushed down on her, making it difficult to think. She remembered Mrs. Hargrove's warnings, the firelight dancing across the old woman's wise face as she told stories of the victims who were never seen again. Those who wandered too close to the Frostman's lair would be frozen forever, caught in a cold embrace, leaving nothing but silence behind. Suddenly, a scream shattered the deafening night, piercing the stillness with blood-curdling intensity. Lila's heart raced as she realized it was not just fear gripping her, it was the voice of someone she knew. Her friend Rowan. Panic took root in her chest, and she knew she had to act quickly. Bravery surged within her, igniting a fire that chased away the fear. She tore herself away from the shadows of her home, desperate to help her friend. Something deep inside her pulled her forward. She could not let fear hold her back. Bursting into the frigid air, Lila sprinted towards the source of the screams. The flickering light of villagers' torches bobbed like fireflies in the distance, lighting her path, but the consuming darkness felt alive, swallowing every breath she took. She heard the wind whisper her name, the icy cold urging her to stop. "Lila, stop! Turn back!" But she had already lost too much to let fear rule her actions again. The Curries. The terror of the Frostman transformed into a defiance that propelled her legs forward, carrying her through the chaos of the darkened night. As Lila reached the old oak tree at the edge of the village, she skidded to a halt, her breath hitching in her throat. There stood Rowan, frozen in horror, transformed into an agonized statue encased in ice. His face was a reflection of pure terror, wide eyes that seemed to pierce right through the darkness, searching for hope that had been snatched away. The Frostman loomed before him, a monstrous figure adorned in shimmering frost that glittered under the pale moonlight. Lila's heart sank as she watched icy fingers stretching toward her friend, the frigid air crackling with an unbearable tension. "No!" she screamed, the sound lost in the furious wind that whipped around them like a wild beast. Time felt as if it had slowed, and the world around her faded into silence as she focused entirely on Rowan and the creature before him. It was then that she felt an ominous presence, that familiar chill that made all the hair on her arms stand up. The Frostman's gaze transitioned from Rowan to Lila, his eyes hollow and piercing. "Run, Lila!" Rowan shouted, his voice hoarse, tinged with desperation. Now, in that moment, Lila wanted nothing more than to pull him away, to save him from the icy grip that threatened to ensnare his very soul. She felt so helpless, fear constricting her limbs like vines wrapping tightly around her body. The Frostman glided closer, his movements graceful yet inevitable, the cold air intensifying with each passing moment. When the Frostman finally reached out, his fingers brushed against Rowan's shoulder in a cruelly gentle caress. A chilling screech filled the air, echoing like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Rowan's face transformed into an expression of horror that quickly morphed into an unsettling stillness. Lila felt a wave of emotion crashing down on her, despair, anger, and fear all mixed into one. She couldn't believe what was happening. She could hardly breathe as she witnessed her friend freeze before her, lifeless as a statue caught in a moment of terror. And just like that, the world spiraled into a sickening swirl of darkness as the Frostman turned his cold gaze upon her, eyes glimmering with malice. "Help!" Lila cried, the words sticking in her throat as a lump of ice formed where hope used to reside. She stumbled backward, feeling smaller and smaller as the oppressive darkness closed in around her. The Frostman remained still, an unsettling calm enveloping him as if he savored the fear radiating from Lila. It filled the air like a thick fog, wrapping tightly around her very being. Lila felt the urge to run pulse through her, to shake off the paralyzing fear. But it clung to her like a second skin. She remembered the stories of others like Rowan who had disappeared, swallowed by the darkness, leaving behind only echoes of their laughter in the wind. The village felt lost, its spirit dimmed by the chilling laughter of the Frostman that echoed like a haunting melody in her mind. The very world felt unreal, and her friends, the ones she treasured, seemed snatched away by the bitter cold. "No, no, no!" Lila chanted desperately, her mind racing to find a way out. She was alone now, trapped in a moment that stretched into eternity. The chilling silence that followed her cries told her that perhaps there was no one left to save. Lila remembered her family tucked away, the warm glow of their home where they turned their backs to the icy night. Memories of laughter and warmth collided with the stark reality she faced now. As the Frostman stepped forward, his icy breath swirling thickly in the air, Leela knew she had to make a decision. He wasn't just hunting. He was waiting to extinguish the last flicker of hope in her heart. Suddenly, everything she loved crashed over her home, her family, her friends, and the laughter they shared. A rush of warmth surged through her despite the bone-deep cold that surrounded her. Leela felt a fierce determination rising within her, igniting a spark of defiance. So Leela took a deep breath, tasting the frost in the air. Instead of retreating from the Frostman, she stood her ground, clenching her fists. She could feel the warmth of her belief wrapping around her like a protective hug. "You will not take me too!" she shouted, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the chilling wind. The Frostman paused, surprised by her challenge. For a moment, the wind stilled, and the world around them seemed to hold its breath. Leela felt her heart pound, not with fear, but with courage. She could not let the Frostman win, not when there were people who needed her. She was not just a victim, she was a fighter, and she would not let darkness swallow her village without a struggle. With each pulse of her heart, the warmth inside her grew. Leela focused on the light she had left within her, a bright flame that no darkness could completely extinguish. The warmth grew stronger, and she reached out, hoping to awaken all the courage hidden deep within her. The Frostman's icy fingers brushed against that warmth, and for a moment, he hesitated. "You're not the only one with power," Leela declared, finding her voice. It echoed in the night air. The villages of laughter and friendship, of warmth and togetherness surged in her mind. She felt their combined strength pumping through her veins with each heartbeat. "You may freeze my friends, but I will fight you with every ounce of my spirit." And just like that, the flicker of hope ignited a blazing light around her, pushing back the cold that threatened to consume her. In the dark undercurrents of fear, Leela felt her body turn cold, too cold. The once warm village stood still around her, the laughter and chatter now replaced with an unsettling silence. The Frostman's laughter echoed, sending chills deep into her bones. She knew that the darkness had woven its story around them all, and she was a part of it now. Leela had always dreamed of adventure now. As a little girl, she would sit by the fire, listening to her grandmother share tales of magic and wonder. She imagined exploring faraway lands filled with vibrant colors and friendly creatures. But now, standing alone in the heart of the village, surrounded by the deep shadows and haunting silence, everything felt different. The Frostman's laughter was not the kind of music she had imagined in her dreams. Instead, it was a chilling reminder of the danger lurking just beyond her sight. As Leela stumbled back, her breath fogged in the night air, she felt tears streaming down her face, warming her cheeks in contrast to the biting cold around her. She turned to flee, the icy grip of the Frostman lingering like a curse. Each beat of her heart felt like a drum echoing in the silence, a reminder that she was alive, yet trapped in a winter nightmare. But in her heart, she felt something shift. A part of her no longer fought. A part of her knew she was ensnared by this bleak and unforgiving night. The Frostman was the chill in the air, wrapping around the village like a blanket of despair, and every soul he touched faded into an echo lost in the frost. With one last glance, Leela stared into the lifeless figure of Rowan, a boy who had once shared stories with her under the big oak tree. His face was frozen in terror, his warmth snuffed out in an instant. The reality of the impending doom sank in like a dead weight in her chest. "I should never have come here," she whispered through clenched teeth, the words escaping like a painful exhale. But it was too late for regrets. The village was forever changed. A deep longing for the mundane joys of life filled her heart, a warmth that felt miles away. As the wind howled again, it created a cruel symphony, whistling and wailing like a lost spirit searching for a way home. Shadows danced on the walls of her mind, flickering like the dying flames of their torches. She could almost feel the stories they had shared that night fading into oblivion, swallowed whole by the Frostman's laughter. The memories slipped away like snowflakes melting on a warm day, leaving her feeling hollow and alone. Leela could almost sense the frost creeping into her heart, as if a part of her was agreeing with the Frostman's chilling influence. "Come closer, child." The Frostman beckoned softly, his voice an eerie melody that seemed to wrap around her like a fog. "Do not fear the snow. It will embrace you." His words were tempting, but she knew they held a sinister promise. Still, She felt drawn to him, frozen even. Each step toward him felt like wading through thick molasses, heavy and suffocating, moving deeper into the icy grasp of the monster that haunted her dreams. She was terrified, but a strange calm was starting to overpower her. What was happening to her? Why was she no longer running? Why did the chilling sensation come? Not just from the frost man, but from within herself. The warmth around her began to fade, each heartbeat a reminder of what she was losing, of who she once was. As shadows closed in around her, the village faded to a distant memory. The haunting laughter felt like it was vibrating in the very air she breathed, whispering false promises of peaceful eternity. Soon she found herself standing before him, the frost man's shadows curling around her like thick mist, enveloping her in a damp, cold embrace. "Join the others, my dear." "Feel the silence," he hissed, his eyes swirling with dark magic that held ancient secrets. The sense of dread and despair grew deeper, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of unconsciousness. The last remnants of hope flickered away like a candle extinguished by the wind. With one last breath of warmth, Leela pressed her eyes closed, and yet she could still feel the chill wrapping around her like a shroud. The frost was not just outside, it consumed her from within, an echo of doom playing in her mind. When Leela opened her eyes again, she saw nothing but white, an endless expanse of snow and ice. The village was gone. Rowan, the warmth of her friends, and even the joyful echoes of laughter had turned to fading memories. The frost man held his icy grasp, and she realized she had become part of the mountain's tale, entwined forever in the frost. No longer would she feel warmth or love. Only the bitter cold awaited her at the edge of winter. In that dismal moment, Leela understood more than ever. There was no escape from the darkness. The frost man claimed what was left of her hope and laughter, leaving behind an empty shell, a flickering image of who she once was. As the last echoes of human warmth faded into a haunting silence, she felt herself vanish into the embrace of ice, her name now whispered only by the chill of night. Flashes of memory danced through Leela's mind. She recalled the first snow of the season, how she had made snowflakes with her friends and drawn smiling faces in the frosty air. How they had built a snowman together, giving him a crooked carrot for a nose and a scarf that dazzled in the sun. Those moments now felt like fragments of a dream, lost in a time long past, fading away in the winter of her despair. In the heart of the mountain, the frostman's laugh faded into the sound of the frost swirling around, a blood-curdling reminder of the forsaken lives left frozen in his wake. With each haunting note, she saw flashes of the village return, the children playing, the villagers sharing meals, their stories swirling like autumn leaves in the crisp breeze. They were snapshots of joy, moments that seemed so distant now, yet they tugged at her heart. "Remember the warmth," a voice echoed softly in her mind. It was gentle and sweet, her grandmother's voice. With it came the love and warmth of home that seemed to glow brighter than the cold surrounding her. "You are stronger than you think, Leela. You carry the light within you." With every heartbeat, Leela felt the flickering light stirring within her. It was a small spark against the vast cold, a flame fighting to survive. Determined to hold on to that memory, Leela began to resist. The shadows of the frostman still wrapped around her, but she imagined the warmth of laughter wrapping around her instead, a blanket of happiness that shielded her from the ice. "I will not become lost," she whispered, her voice trembling as she summoned every ounce of courage left inside her. This was her fight. The frostman paused, his icy grip faltering slightly at her words. "You think you can defy me?" he sneered, anger flickering in his swirling eyes. Your warmth is nothing against the cold of my embrace." But Leela stood tall, her heart racing, as she focused on the memories that had once brought her joy, the friends who had stood by her side. She remembered the feeling of holding hands and sharing secrets, the joy of storytelling under the night sky, sparkles dancing in their eyes like stars. "I will fight to hold on to my warmth," she proclaimed, louder and stronger now, determination washing over her. Slowly, she felt the shadows of despair begin to lift. With courage burning in her heart, Leela imagined the snow melting away, transforming the icy world around her. She envisioned her village, full of people alive with laughter and memories, undaunted by the frost. With each thought, she saw the shadows retreating, battling against the icy winds. "I will not be just another echo lost to the frost." Leela shouted, Feeling an unstoppable force building inside her, the Frostman staggered back, his laughter faltering as the warmth from her memories clashed against his chilling presence. With her heart aflame with memories of love and joy, Leela felt the ground beneath her shift, transforming from frozen white to warm earth. Flowers bloomed, delicate and bright, as if the very essence of spring was fighting through the winter's grasp. The village began to reappear, flickering like candle flames coming to life one by one. Suddenly, Rowan's figure came back to life. Leela's heart soared as she reached out, calling for him. "Rowan, we need to fight him together!" The villagers began to awaken around her, their spirit ignited, ready to push back against the dark. They joined hands, creating a circle of warmth and light that surrounded the Frostman. "You cannot defeat me," he bellowed. But now his voice held a quiver of fear, sensing the gathering strength of warmth and hope. They closed their eyes and focused on the light inside them, a light bright enough to illuminate even the darkest paths. Leela opened her eyes one last time, and this time, she did not see only white. She saw colors, the rich greens of grass, the brilliant blues of skies, and the shimmering yellows of sunlight breaking through the winter chill. With her friends rallying around her, she felt the last remnants of fear melting away, replaced by unity and strength. Together, they summoned a powerful wave of warmth that washed over the Frostman. "You will not take us!" they shouted in unison, their voices rising like a mighty storm. The ice began to crack and splinter, the grasp of the Frostman weakening as their light surged forward, engulfing him in fire and hope. In an explosion of warmth, the Frostman howled, his laugh turning into a fury of rage that echoed in the mountains, before vanishing into the depth of the winter air. The white landscape shattered into brilliant colors as the first hints of spring broke through the bleak winter. Leela blinked and found herself in the village once more, amid a group of smiling friends and family. The laughter rang bright and clear in her ears. They had triumphed, keeping the echoes of the dark at bay. As the fear faded, she felt the warmth returning to her heart, a vibrant flame of hope against the chill. In that moment, Leela understood the true power of togetherness and love, enriching her spirit and knitting them back into the fabric of their lives. She realized that, though cold and darkness may visit from time to time, the warmth of love is a flame that cannot be snuffed out, as long as they held each other close. "I'm never afraid again," Leela whispered, looking at her friends with newfound strength and joy. And in the embrace of warmth, they welcomed the dawn of a new day, ready to face any challenge that lay ahead, with hearts full of courage.